Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ashton College online info session for our LEED V4 course. Very excited to have you all here. My name is CJ McGilvery. I'm part of the Ashton College marketing team. I'm joined by several colleagues today. We have Maggie from admissions. We also have Rika and Maria, who are handling all of the technical aspects on the back end of this webinar. And we have Lorne, who's our instructor for the course. Welcome, everyone. Whether you're joining us on Facebook Live, on the Zoom webinar, or if you're watching on YouTube after the fact, there are lots of ways that you can engage with us during this session. You can use the chat box function. You can also use the Q&A box function. If you're on Facebook Live or YouTube, just leave us a note in the comments and we will incorporate that. If you are on YouTube after the fact, you can always also email us at ceinfo@ashtoncollege.ca. or just give us a call at 604-891-1256 or toll free at 1-866-759-6006. So as I said, lots of ways to engage with us. I'm very excited to have you all here, and I'm going to pass the mic over to Lorne to start our presentation for today.
Thank you very much, CJ, and thank you for everybody joining us on Facebook and Zoom. I am going to do my best at giving a little intro on what LEED is all about, how it relates to sustainability, green buildings, who are my usual suspects who attend my courses, and hopefully you'll join us when we start in 2021. Now, a little bit about myself. My name is Lorne Mlotek. I am a civil engineer by trade. I went to the University of Toronto and I graduated from there about almost 10 years ago. Don't need to date myself right now. And I'm going to get into why LEED exists, what's its purpose, how it can help you in your careers, and really why it's so important for us to get on board and behind sustainable certifications today in the industry, in a multiple number of industries. And so one interesting thing in a lot of my courses is really the diversity of the backgrounds in attendance and where everybody comes from. So I teach these courses Canada-wide. Normally when I'm allowed to travel, I do in-person classes. Of course, we've all switched online, which has not hindered anything, which is really a big benefit because it makes it a lot more accessible to a lot more people. And I'm just going to give a little background on how I got into the industry, and everybody has a very unique path to where and why they came or why they're here. So it's always interesting to know. And a quick little history lesson on me. After my first year at civil engineering, I worked at this company called Morris and Hirschfield, my first internship, really excited about it. And I was working on the en route service centers along our highways in Ontario. And at that point, they were all going for LEED Silver. And that was my first exposure to LEED. I said, what is this? What's going on here? And these are pretty cool looking buildings. I'm excited to work on them. But why do they need to be LEED certified? What's this all about? And I started to learn more and more about greenwashing, how different companies and builders build their building, paint it green, and say, hey, look at me, I got a sustainable green building. When in fact, who really knows if it's good for the environment, economy, and/or society? And so that's when I found out what LEED really is. It's a third-party standard for us to trust that we know we're getting an actual sustainable building out of our investment. And that really piqued my interest. I've come across a lot of different engineering and architectural principles, and this one finally hit the nail, and I was really excited about it. And working on the project, I was getting more and more involved, and I saw that you can personally get accredited. No matter your background, you can become a LEED professional, it's called, or the first step, a LEED Green Associate. And I said, this is really interesting. This is going to get me ahead, and might as well do it now because I'm pretty passionate about the subject matter. Back then, though, it was interesting. You needed real-life LEED experience on an actual project, and I had a very luxurious task on all those projects. I single-handedly designed all of their RV waste stations, which if you're familiar with what an RV waste station is, it's a hole in the ground where you're supposed to dump the RV's waste. Gross, I know. But that's my claim to fame. Thank you very much. I guess it's kind of sustainable if you think about it, but don't think too much about it. It's gross. And so
Hey, Lauren, really quick question for you. So sorry to interrupt.
Absolutely.
I just don't have video for you at the moment. Are you going to start this sharing now?
I'm totally not sharing my screen. Thank you for,
Sorry to interrupt.
no, please, that's important. I'm just talking to myself right now. Hi, sorry about that.
Perfect.
Thank you for reminding me. Perfect. Okay, so now you can see me. Do you want me to start again, or we can
Let's
continue?
just keep rolling with it.
Let's
That
keep
was super
rolling.
engaging so far.
Great. So as I was just saying, this is me. I guess you haven't seen me yet. And here was my first introduction slide, a little intro. So as I just mentioned, a little bit about how I got into the industry, where I was first exposed to LEED, and where you might be exposed to LEED. You might have seen it on a plaque on a wall. And after I worked on that internship and I worked on those service centers, I took the exam myself. And I took the exam myself and I passed it and I was very happy. I went back to university in my second year and no one knew what LEED was back then, not even my professors, unfortunately. So I didn't have much bragging rights, but this was like 10, 15 years ago. And I was telling my friends and peers about it and they said, look, this is where we're going in the field and it's pretty interesting and kind of necessary for our future. How do I get involved, Lorne? And unfortunately, a lot of the courses and workshops and materials are thousands of dollars and really just aimed at big companies who can afford it. But students, young professionals, or people looking to switch industries, it really left them out. And so I just started tutoring some friends, and eventually there was enough demand to host workshops and other courses to help people get LEED accredited. And as I did that, other universities started to reach out to me and say, hey, our students want to graduate with this too. Can you come on down? So for the last 8 years, I usually travel to 100 cities each year to host this workshop that I'll be working with Ashton to do. And obviously that's changed a bit this year, but so far 11,000 people have taken this course with me, and everybody who's taken the exam after has passed, which is good. No pressure though. And it's really neat because LEED is internationally consistent. So LEED is the same no matter where you are, Canada, US, Europe, South America. It's the exact same exam, it's the exact same certification, and we'll talk more about that. So that's really been what I've been focused on. I also work as a LEED consultant. So I've tried to help some owners and developers actually do the right things to get their building certified. And I try to bring in as many realistic examples as I can to put a better spin on the experience that you're going to feel in this course. Now, my company is Leading Green, and so I'm working with Ashton to host their first LEED class. So I'm very excited about it, and I hope you'll join us. And I'm also a US GBC faculty member, so that stands for the US Green Building Council. And so I'm kind of a trusted source of information to provide this type of preparation and teaching. But that's enough about me. Let's get into the fun stuff. And I really love to just start our minds to get thinking about, why are we even here? Why is this important? What's the reason behind sustainability, LEED, green buildings? It's everywhere. It's a buzzword of the century. And so I like to think back and see how we used to build in our built environments. And before we had any of these fancy energy and electricity consuming devices, buildings are not new. We've been building them for thousands and thousands of years. And so, sorry, I'm just going to open the chat up on my other screen here. Thank you. There we go. Excellent. And I should mention that if anybody has any questions, like Rika said, if you want to put it in the chat here or comment it on Facebook, I will be happy to answer them in the middle or at the end of my class. So as I was mentioning, buildings aren't new. We've been building buildings for thousands and thousands of years, but only recently relying on our fancy devices. Why not look back at how we used to build? Take some of those techniques or variations and incorporate them into our buildings today. And here's a few very great examples. So here we have the Pantheon. We have our big oculus, an open circle in the rooftop, which is the only source of daylight and illuminates the entire space and also allows for rain to fall through, and it's actually captured in aquifers and recycled. Pretty innovative. It's also one of the largest concrete structures ever built and has wonderful insulation properties. Here we see dwellings built into a mountain, which utilizes passive solar, blocking the unwanted heat from the high-angled summer summer sun, but giving us free solar heat gain from the low-angled winter sun for free heat. Simple. And a wigwam, really building with nature as opposed to fighting its elements. If you can incorporate and work with nature in your buildings, that's a great way to think about it. Now, this is what modern day passive ventilation and passive solar. So if you look up at the sky in the summer, the sun shines on a high southern angle tilt. In the winter, it's at a very low winter tilt. And that's what I was mentioning before. Block the unwanted heat from the summer sun with overhangs on the south facade and give us free solar heat gain in the winter. Maybe you can passively cool your building. You know, there's a lot of moderate days, especially on the West Coast, and perhaps you don't need a mechanical air conditioning or HVAC system, and you can bring cool air from the north side of the building and duct it out the hot south. And you know, there's a lot of principles and design possibilities that don't rely on mechanical and electrical equipment, but can really help in not needing them to be used all the time. Now, a little bit more history. We know we have a bit of a carbon dilemma. We've seen over history, our carbon levels have gone up and down, and then since the 50s, they've just been on an exponential rise. Why is that a problem? Well, you've heard of the greenhouse gas effect. That carbon, those greenhouse gases, they trap extra heat in our atmosphere and create more climate change, warming, cooling, and a lot of other adverse effects on our planet, which we always have been talking about recently. You know, not only does the air warm, but so do our waters. Warmer waters are breeding grounds for more vicious hurricanes, and we've had enough of those in the last decade every couple years. There's drought worldwide. You know, there's some statistics that 1 out of 3 of us every single year for the last 5 years have been living in water stress conditions at some point. It's a real risk. Water is not infinite. In fact, it's finite, especially the fresh water, which I'll talk more about. And really just combating our pollutants and other adverse effects, which are often overlooked. And this is something that LEED is going to try and help fix. But there's a lot of people out there that are naysayers to climate change, regardless of the evidence. And to those people, I kind of frame the argument in a bit of a different way. Look, the Earth, it's made up of a finite amount of resources, and the Earth has been generous enough to share them with us. They're unevenly dispersed. In Canada, we're lucky we have lots of resources. However, they are finite. And the rate that we are consuming them is just nonsensical. Regardless of climate change or not, the more we use, the less we'll have, and the more expensive each resource will be. It's not efficient and it's just short-sighted. Eventually, we're going to run out. So whether it's for climate change or just because we depend on a sustainable future and actually have enough resources for the future generations, this is the right place to start. As I mentioned, the buzzword of the 21st century, sustainability. And it's really about leaving more or leaving the Earth better off than when we arrived. And I like to define it with this interesting quote that we don't inherit the Earth from our ancestors, but we rather borrow it from our children, which is a really good way to think about it. Now, a little more for buildings history. In Canada, it is cold here, and most of Canada, 50% of our energy load is due to heating. However, we also have cooling, we also have lighting, and boy, are we having a lot of plug-in devices more and more every day, and our plug loads are getting larger and larger. Now, I often like to pose the question, if you look at these two buildings, and just to get your mind thinking, which one of these is more sustainable? And if you just think about it, look at them, what's the main difference between them? Oh, well, they're 150 years apart is when they built. However, in my point of view, it looks like a difference in facade. So on our newer building, we have this glass floor to ceiling windows, wall-to-wall windows everywhere, whereas this building is only, say, 30% window-to-wall ratio. And even though the building's 150 years old, it has a higher insulating R value, how good it can keep heat in or outside when you want it, versus our new building. And I get into this in detail in my courses, but thinking about your building envelope, what it's made of, can have a huge impact on future needs for the next 100 years in terms of heating and cooling, and I get deep into it. Now, this is a little more of a challenge because, boy, do these look quite similar. So I'm looking at what's the difference between these two buildings. And I noticed one thing, the use type. On this side, we have balconies. That indicates that it's residential. And on the right, no balconies at all. And a lot of people like to think, oh, we talked about passive solar, those overhangs, and maybe those balconies do a form of passive solar. And you're right, they may. However, in actuality, balconies cause a huge issue. A lot of the time when we build buildings, we pour a continuous concrete slab. And what happens is the treated air, the air that's hot or cool inside, gets conducted into our concrete slab, and it's continued and dumped straight outside. And that's a huge source of heat loss. It's called thermal bridging. So by having things like breaks between the continuous slab and your balcony to avoid that thermal bridging is something we'll also discuss. But I just like to get people's heads thinking a little bit more. I just want to make sure everybody can see me on half of the screen and the presentation on the other.
It's looking good on my end. Our attendees, feel free to jump in on the chat if you're missing anything, and we'll troubleshoot for you. But yeah, looking great on my end.
Perfect, perfect, great. All right, so that was a nice history lesson. If I still have your attention, now I'll talk a little bit about LEED. So LEED, it stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And what I mentioned earlier, the main purpose of it is to eliminate greenwashing. There was no standard for people to actually know which building is sustainable or not. People were just claiming that they were doing something good. And that's what LEED is. It's a third-party standard, just like your steel-toed boots have a standard, so they protect your toes, or how clean a restaurant is. You can see that standard in the window to eat there. LEED is the exact same thing, but applying to green buildings. Now, I like LEED a lot because it incorporates many smaller existing standards, which I'll show some. They don't reinvent the wheel. Look, there's a lot of smaller standards that are great for what they do. So instead of just making complete brand new ones, they piggyback and incorporate existing working but underused standards into their own. And I like LEED a lot because it's legitimate. That means we created it. So actual professionals are in the field. So generally, it's not asking us the craziest amount to do, but it is significantly better than our building codes. And when you make the commitment to go green, that happens right away, which is good. Because normally people don't think about how their design decisions affect the overall sustainability of the building until it's too late to make any change. And so in LEED, we make sure people think about it right away, early on in the design. And most importantly, it's marketable. There's been a lot of money spent to show what LEED means and to show the public that LEED means a standard for a sustainable building. Because frankly, if nobody knew what it was, who would care? But because the public, we know what it is, we are demanding it more and more. Now, it's a point-based rating system, and maybe you've seen one of these plaques on a building, and if you haven't, you'll probably take note of them now. They're usually on the front door or behind the concierge desks. And there's 110 total points and different categories, which we'll see. So it's looking here, 40 points is certified, 50 silver, gold 60, and 80 plus is platinum, the highest LEED designation. And through my class, you'll find a lot of detailed descriptions of each point, which we will talk about. And how the LEED rating system works is there's a number of categories. And I'm going to show you each one of them. Within the categories, there's usually a couple prerequisites. You have to do them all. They're mandatory. After you've completed all the prerequisites, we move on to the credits. And this is where you have the option to pick and choose what you want to do on your building to make it more sustainable. And that is also where the points lie. And that eventually, depending on the amount of credits and points, determines the award your building receives at the end of the process. These are the categories that If you stare at it long enough, you'll memorize them like I have. And there's a set amount of points per category, which we can see. And in the courses, I go through them all in detail. But on a bigger picture, I want to talk about why you've probably heard of LEED and why you would want to be involved in it after all, and why it's so popular today. And a major point of popularity is because they've proven, LEED has, that going green doesn't have to mean cash money green all the time. You know, out there people just associate green, oh, money, 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 it's just a money pit. It's really not true. It's generally a lower initial cost, and it's different depending on where you're building a building. But in Canada, I've seen 1 to 3 to 5% initial construction cost premiums, which doesn't seem like that much, but these $100 million buildings, 1 to 3 million bucks is still something to most people. So why bother with it if it does cost a little more off the bat? Developers like it because there's a high return on their investment in 2 ways. The indirect way is their marketability. You know, a lot of universities, a lot of banks only buy and lease LEED certified space. Why? It strengthens something called our corporate social responsibility program. And so those companies can say, hey, look at how sustainable we are. And these are actual empirical evidence of what we're doing and tracking it. And so if I'm making a decision between university A or B or bank A or B, well, I might take A over B if it aligns with my environmental values, which are more and more important in the market every year. Now that's the indirect return, you know, more marketability. The real return is a savings over time. Yes, you might be paying a little bit more upfront, but as this chart shows, our ongoing costs are significantly lower. So we see that a red building just built to code at year 0, the lowest cost possible. But over time, we're using more energy, requiring more maintenance, water. It's not the best built building, so our ongoing costs are pretty high. Whereas a green building, yeah, costs a little bit more upfront, but we're less vulnerable to the fluctuations of energy, of water prices, simply because you're just using less of this stuff. And maybe you even have renewables on site. You could sell back to the grid and recoup some of that initial investment right away. And so that's really the big business case and why LEED has become so popular, because it's a pretty easy case for me to make when I approach different owners. Now, maybe you've seen this picture before. It is called the triple bottom line, the 3 Ps. It's all meaning the same thing. It's really the basis of sustainability in LEED's perspective, and mine as well. So I kind of group the earth into these 3 spheres. There's the profit economy, the people society, and the planet environment. And I'm really hoping that if my building can satisfy a lot of people's wants and needs in each of these spheres, I'm going to get a sustainable building in the middle. And when I go through all the credits, this is always in the back of my mind, thinking how these ideas relate to a more sustainable building or a more sustainable planet. It's really the basis of sustainability. And what we just talked about was the profit side, with that high return on the initial investment to build a green building. But what about the people, you and me? Where are we coming into this conversation? Well, frankly, we're a third of that diagram, and we're seeing people demand more and more sustainable buildings. And frankly, if I'm watching the market demand LEED buildings, and companies are sitting on their hands and not answering that market demand, those companies aren't doing too well in the future. And so we're seeing a huge market shift to answer the demand, which is great because we're able to drive the market to be more sustainable, and the built environment is a huge part of sustainability, since they're huge consumers of energy and producers of greenhouse gases. Now, as I mentioned right at the beginning, I always have a very diverse background of where people come from into my courses. And I'm not just talking about geographically diverse, because that is true. LEED is global, it's internationally consistent, and that's why I have people from all time zones in my webinar. It's fascinating. But the usual suspects are architects, landscape architects, civil, mechanical, electrical, architectural, chemical, pretty much every kind of engineer. I have construction professionals from subs to general, a lot of interior designers and architects, landscape architects, urban planners, environmental science, environmental studies students, or people that are just passionate about sustainability in general. I even have a number of manufacturers attend my courses because they want to know how they can market their products to contribute to points in a LEED building. So that's one of the nicest things about LEED, is it is so diverse. And really, if you don't know what you want to focus on in this wide-ranging field, you might get exposed to a part of it that you don't even know is out there. And as I mentioned, that's exactly what happened to me. I got exposed to this, I was really passionate about it, and I just ran with it, and I'm still doing it. So I really love how don't hesitate based on your prior knowledge or background. This is the right place to start. I really teach it from the ground up, which you'll see. I don't really expect anybody to have much knowledge about this field, and because it's pretty specific to LEED. Now, as I was mentioning, people are demanding green buildings, so companies are supplying it. They are healthier. People are happier, more comfortable. It's more breathable. During COVID, these are huge, huge elements to making sure we have a good amount of fresh air and a good cycle of that treated air out. So it's even getting more and more important. But frankly, we're inside 90% of our lives, and so we better be as comfortable as possible. There's also a huge generational shift. You know, Earth Day, Earth Hour, who even knew about these things 40 years ago? Now they're completely embedded in our culture. The places that I went for field trips in school as a kid, now there's a LEED home. Now there's this Earth Rangers Center where I used to go near the Courtright Center as a child. It's really embedded into our education system, which is awesome. So it's been a huge cultural change. But most important for us here today, it's our future. And it's a brand new job market. We've had the blue collar workers, the white collar industry, and unfortunately I didn't wear the right color today, but now we have the green collar industry. I wore the other two, not the green, sorry about that. And it's a big job market. It's only growing. You can see more and more sustainable demands in the industry, this is the right place to get your foot in the door and get started. And after all, it is our future, so we should probably not mess things up more than we have. And here are some cute babies over there to remind you. And that is the people side of the triple bottom line. And the planet side, look, we're going to get into in detail in my classes, but we talked about it earlier. Frankly, there's only one planet. Let's do our best not to destroy it, at least preserve it for a few more generations or hundreds of more generations, I hope. And I talk lots about how to reduce greenhouse gases and really combat the adverse effects that we are having on the planet as humans. Now, depending on where you are, there's sometimes actual incentives to ease the financial premiums, the extra costs associated with green buildings, and they make it easier. And so some examples that I've seen throughout my career, structural incentives. Hey, if you build a green building in downtown Vancouver, maybe I'll let you build the extra floor you're normally not zoned for. An extra floor, why would I let them do that as a city? Well, as the city of Vancouver, I'm looking at it, I'm saying, this building is going to use less energy and less water. That's less load on my city's infrastructure. I want that. I'll let them build an extra floor. And as the builder, you're saying, I can build and sell a floor I never even thought I was allowed to. You could potentially recoup your extra cost right there. That's not as popular as financial incentives, and they're quite cyclical. So different cities, depending on who's the mayor, who's in charge, have these come in and out. A wonderful example is in Toronto, where I'm originally from, the Toronto Green Standard. So we have pretty stringent building codes in Ontario. And in Toronto specifically, you have to comply with another code, the Toronto Green Standard. And if you comply with the second level, you get like 25% of your permitting fees back, which was 800 grand for a project that I worked on. And if you're already building to that high quality, you're near or above a LEED certified building, and it just makes sense to get that certification for the building too. And albeit they're not as popular as I'd like if green building incentives were an international standard, my job would be a lot easier, but that's what I'm here for. And there's also non-financial ones, build a green building in your city. We'll put you on the city's website as the greenest building in town to show off. LEED is not alone though. There's a lot of green building rating systems around the world. There's BREEAM in the UK, ENEV in Germany, BBSA in France, Green Star in South Africa. There's another one called the Living Building Challenge, which is way harder than LEED. But the reason why LEED is the most popular by far is because it's realistic. As I mentioned, it's not asking the craziest amount, but it's much better than our codes. And it's also the same in every country. And multinational companies love that because they can keep their building programs to a consistent high standard globally. Now, there's really two sides of LEED, and the one side we talked about is the buildings. Buildings get certified, and we saw the plaque. The other side is people, and that's what this course is about. People get accredited. Now, a little bit about each accreditation. So the first level, it's mandatory that you start here for the LEED Green Associate, which is what our course at Ashton is going to focus on and what you can look forward to by passing it at the end of the class. Now, the Green Associate, it's a pretty introductory class to green buildings. It's a wonderful way to get your foot in the door. And so I mentioned all the different backgrounds that people join the class from, and that's totally fine no matter what your background or geographical location. It will not hinder your experience at all. A lot of people take this course as wanting a nice resume booster, which, yes, don't get me wrong, it is a very good one to have on your resume. But trust me, it's a lot more than that, and you'll learn a lot more than just the resume booster. But that is a very big advantage, I'll be honest. It's in demand out there in the industry. Look, when companies are bidding on projects and they're seeing those projects are asking to be LEED certified. If I can bid on them and say, hey, look, all of our staff are LEED accredited, we have an idea of what we're doing, it's a lot easier for them to get those projects. And you having this under your belt makes you a lot more attractive for those coveted positions. You don't have to worry about it. You've done it already. And it's not even just engineers, architects, interior designers. I even do, banks. So they want to know where their money is going for their real estate projects, and they want to understand LEED. And that's why they get the Green Associate, because they want to see where all their money is going to make the building green. And there's a little more information about the exam fees, $100 for students, $250 for everybody else. It used to be always $250, and I've been begging them for years to reduce, and they did a couple years ago for students, which is wonderful. And I'll take full credit, but I'm sure I had nothing to do with that decision. But it helped a lot of students out to make this more affordable. So that's the Green Associate, that's level 1, and that's what the course is about. I want to mention the other couple. The AP, the Accredited Professional, is the one you eventually need to get if you're going to be working directly with LEED buildings. However, a lot of my past participants just stop at the Green Associate, which is perfectly fine. And there's different specialties in the AP. For example, I'm a BD&C, which is for new buildings, and an AP O&M for existing buildings. And then there's an interior design and construction specialty, a neighborhood development for urban planners, and homes for single family or low-rise 8-story homes. But no matter what, the Green Associate has to be passed first. And then the fellow is just like an honorary designation. If you've done something special in the industry, you can get nominated for it. Now, there are 2 governing bodies of LEED. The number 1 is the US Green Building Council, which I did mention. They invented LEED about 20 years ago, and they're the ones that update the rating system. They also present our reference guides, 800 wonderful pages telling you exactly what you need to do to build a LEED building. It's like the Bible of LEED. And then there's this tool called LEED Online, which is where we submit all of our proof that we built the building properly. And the GBCI are the ones that review it and make sure we did it correctly. They also create our exams for us to pass. Now, I want to mention that pretty much every country nowadays has their own Green Building Council. And in Canada, we do too. We have the Canadian Green Building Council. And they do some awesome public advocacy work. They have conferences, they have some education as well. But because LEED is the exact same everywhere, The USGBC's version of LEED is what we are tested on and what we use even in Canada. No matter what, it's a standard test. So I just like to mention that. Now, on a big picture again, think little thought project. Our population's rising pretty quickly on the planet. The only thing going up faster is our demand for energy. And there's only two ways to keep up. You're going to create more sources of energy or just use less of it overall. But think about it like this. For every 1 more kilowatt hour of energy we need, it is 3 to 100 times more expensive to generate it, whether it's coal, renewable, nuclear, it doesn't matter how. That new facility is expensive. Versus saying, hey, instead of building new, where do we already use that 1 kilowatt hour? And let's reduce our consumption instead. It's almost sometimes 100 times cheaper to do that. So if economically it makes sense to focus on reducing our consumption as much as possible instead of building up new capacity, we should probably go for the biggest consumer, which are buildings. Buildings consume almost 50% of our energy, 72% of our electricity, and produce a whopping 38% of our carbon dioxide emissions. And so if it makes sense to attack the largest fruit on the tree of energy consumption, let's do it. And that is one of the largest parts of LEED in our courses, focusing on how our built environment can lessen its impact on the planet, people, and society, and the economy. I mentioned that LEED incorporates really good existing proven tools like life cycle assessment, which is out there, but people often overlook or don't incorporate it. And LEED takes these principles and incorporates them within the credits, so often builders use them without even knowing. And the whole idea of life cycle is not just looking at one stage of a product or building's impact, but its entire life. What happened when you transported it, used it, created it, end of life, where does it go? I get into these a lot more in my classes, but these are kind of the 7 ways and impact categories of what LEED deems as important. So you see, number 1, we're trying to reverse our contribution to our climate change. We're looking at human health and well-being improvements, protecting our water, our biodiversity, our other resources, a greener economy, and just overall social equity are the impact categories we talk about. Now, I just want to briefly touch on the different rating systems. I mentioned them when I was talking about the LEED AP. So one thing I love LEED for recognizing over the years is different buildings have different needs from a sustainable standpoint. So there's 5 rating systems, which I mentioned already, for new buildings, for existing renovations, retrofits. But within each of those, there's also market adaptations, because a new school has a few unique credits versus a new data center. So they've really made it a lot more specific and pertinent to the building types, which I like. Now, to get that plaque on your wall, I mentioned you have to comply with all the prerequisites. And the reason is, if I'm in Toronto, I'm saying, you know, water's cheap. Forget about the water efficiency of my building. I'm just going to focus on the energy. You cannot do that. You need to work on the entire sustainable profile of the building. And that's why the prerequisites exist. They say, hey, you have to be 20% more water efficient, 5% more energy efficient, at least bring in this much fresh air. And once you've checked off those boxes, you can say, all right, LEED, I did it. I'm 20% more water efficient, and I get why I had to do it. But now you focus on what you want in the credits. And that's where you get the points, which I mentioned, and I talk a lot more about in my class. Now, what I'm going to do right now is really briefly go through each of the categories and kind of the ideas behind them. Of course, I'm not going to go into too much detail because that's what the course is going to be all about, but I'll just show you my intro slide. The integrative process is all about working collaboratively and finding synergies between different design goals as opposed to working in a vacuum and not knowing how other design decisions are going to affect yours. Our next category, location and transportation. And these boxes, I go into detail in my class, but it's really about how to remember each credit. And it's my naming convention to help you do so. And this one focuses on, are you building in the middle of nowhere where you're going to need new infrastructure from roads, water, electrical systems, or are you developing in an already existing community which you can share? We look at how people are going to get to the building. Is everybody driving alone in a big gas guzzler, or is there access to public transit? Is it bikeable? You know, do we have green vehicle and carpooling incentives? And that's location and transportation. Sustainable sites, and this is my little legend about how I've named the credits, which you don't need to know until you take the class. But sustainable sites looks at the construction pollution. It looks at managing rainwater. It looks at reducing the heat island effect and light pollution. Everything to do with the actual site itself. In water, we look at the water efficiency not only inside the building with our flush and flow fixtures, but also outdoor water use with our irrigation. And perhaps using non-potable, such as recycled rainwater, to offset our other potable water uses. And it's all about lowering potable water usage in and around the building, because as I said, it's a finite resource. Energy, look at Canada. We're #1. We are the best. We're the worst. We use the most energy per person in the world. Crazy. Why? Well, luckily, a lot of people have access to energy here. Not so luckily, it gets really cold here, and it gets really hot here. And relative energy costs are cheap. So we're not afraid to use it. And that's what this looks, that's why it looks like this. But how I look at this waking up every day, this is the easiest time to get in the industry. It's the best time. We're never gonna have this much to improve on. It's the easiest time to improve. So there's your Canadian optimism. And oh, here's a picture of me before I started traveling and had a lovely flow of hair in a PV array panel that I worked on in Ontario, which was a really cool experience. So for energy, just briefly, we talk about something known as commissioning, which is really verifying that these unique systems are installed properly. We talk a lot about energy modeling, which is a whole field in itself, as is commissioning an entire field in itself. And we talk about how LEED incorporates those. And we talk about all different ways to possibly improve the energy efficiency of the building. Now, we also talk about refrigerants like Freon or chlorofluorocarbons in our HVAC systems, our air conditioners. We try to meter, we look at demand response programs and renewable energy generation on-site and off-site, and that's energy. This is just the energy prerequisite and credit, and I just wanted to show you how an example of a baseline that we have to compare our new building to something. So LEED piggybacks, as I said, off of other standards to try and beat them and be green. And here's an example of an energy model and how the points break down and the different numbers that I need to collect and provide LEED with so they can verify that our building is doing what it's supposed to. Materials and resources are our next major one, and there's kind of two elements of it. Number one, where do your products come from? How are they made? And then where are they going to go at the end of their life? And that's the big deal behind materials and resources. This is where LEED piggybacks off of so many different product standards. LEED doesn't want to generate their own new standards when there's already working ones out there, and that's what materials and resources focusing on. Sourcing your materials and products sustainably, and that they were manufactured sustainably. Indoor environmental quality. This one I said has been talked about a lot about in recent years, in recent days. We look at the indoor air quality performance and different standards to make sure you're getting enough fresh air. Where we look at combating the adverse effects of tobacco smoke. We look at low VOC, volatile organic compounds, in paint and adhesives and formaldehyde and all these awful off-gassing pollutants that pollute our indoor air quality. And that's all about like the breathability of the air. But our comfort is a huge factor in our daily life. Not being too hot or cold, thermal comfort. Having access to a thermostat, having access to how much light I have at my desk, having daylight, having a view, and at least being able to hear myself with a high level of acoustic performance. And this is just an example of our first prerequisite that I go into detail in my class, and a few other documentations of how to prove the credit. And then there's these two little bonus categories called innovation and design, which if you're doing something on your building which goes above and beyond or is outside of the LEED rating system, but still a good idea, you can submit your own credit. You can actually create your own. And being a LEED AP, so little old me, I'm worth a point as well on a LEED project as a LEED AP. So that's always an advantage. And a good reason to go for the AP when you're working on LEED projects. And regional priority, because a building in Vancouver does not have the same priorities as a building in Los Angeles and a building in Toronto. So LEED, each region selects the 6 most important credits and adds an extra point onto them to incentivize us to do them in that region. And just, I know how much information I just gave you. I tried to really cram a lot in because I thought it was interesting, and especially if you're new to this whole industry, it can be a little daunting because there's a lot of directions you can take, and I hope this did a decent job about getting you excited for the potential course, and I hope that you will join us. But I want to remind you, as I said before at the beginning, we can really learn from our past. Buildings aren't new. Let's take different passive designs and construction techniques that consume little to no energy and incorporate them into our buildings. We could, we should, and we need to do a better job about it. Also, LEED is not the answer to all of our world's problems. I wish it was, but it's an excellent place to start. And every few years, a new version of LEED comes out. So currently we're on LEED version 4, and it really upped the bar from version 3. And eventually, as we continue to push the envelope, I think LEED will be the answer to at least a couple major challenges we face today. Also, in the class, you're going to be scratching your head a lot saying, what is he talking about? That's just the most logical way to build a building anyway, and you are right. But historically, in this design and construction industry, trust me, it is the birthplace of shortcuts. And those shortcuts have dire consequences later on. So in LEED, we're incentivizing designers and builders to do it right the first time round. And everybody has to do a good job of working together, no matter what angle you're working at the project on from, and we'll talk a lot about that. So that is all of the jazz for today. I hope this either got your mind going, and I hope you generated a lot of thinking or questions in your mind, and I would love to open it up to CJ. I'm going to stop sharing. If there's any other questions from the audience, that would be lovely. I'd be happy to try my best and answer them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lauren. That was a fascinating presentation. I feel like you covered so much and definitely got me really excited about the course and all the potential students who will be able to study with you. I do have a couple questions that I wanted to ask. I think I'll shorten that list a little bit. But before we move on to questions, why don't we jump over to Maggie from admissions, just so she can speak a little bit to the Ashton College process. So Maggie, take it away.
Thank you, CJ, and Lorne, thank you very much. I've been looking forward to this info session because this is something that not everyone knows about, and all this collected information is a must to hear these days. Thank you very much, Lorne.
Thank you.
Hello there, everyone. My name is Maggie from admissions, and I will answer all your inquiries regarding the course registration. Should you need further assistance or any questions that you might have there, we are here to help you. To all the potential students, if you think that you've heard enough, we guarantee that you will get more from taking the course. The start date is on March 5 till April 9. Again, that will be on March 5 till April 9, and webinars will be held on Fridays from 4 p.m. till 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The registration fee for this course is $420. That's it, no other charges. To get online information, you may visit our website at ashtoncollege.ca, and this course is under continuing education. You can also contact me at 604-891-1256, and I will be there to answer all your inquiries. Thank you, CJ and Lorne.
Thank you so much, Maggie. So absolutely, please do reach out to Maggie if you have any at all questions. So Lauren, I don't think that we have any current questions from our attendees, though I would encourage folks to jump in at any point if you do have any questions. I just have a couple questions about your personal teaching style, and I think you did a phenomenal job of covering really all of the foundational knowledge around LEED. So just a fun question, what do you love most about your job?
This aspect of it. So I was very lucky to find out that public speaking is something that I wasn't terrible at an early point in life. And actually watching people, especially when I was a lot younger, teaching and then saying, what is this guy going to tell me that I don't already know? And then watching their eyes just really brighten up and walk out saying, wow, I'm very thankful. So that's the most rewarding part of this whole gig. And that is by far what I really enjoy about it.
Amazing. And what do you think that students will enjoy most about taking this course with you?
That it's not technical, that anybody can do it. Honestly, it's actually interesting. So it's not, and I'm biased because this is my life, but there's a lot of different courses and certifications out there that it's just full complete regurgitation of it. You memorize it, you brain dump, and you never remember it again. This is a way broader. I believe that this information can be applied to a lot of different areas depending on where your life takes you. And because it is interesting, you're going to remember it. And I think it's really thought-provoking too. So that's what I think.
Wonderful. I know you talked a little bit about all of the different careers that people might have before taking this LEED course. I'm curious if you ever have students who come from, a radically different industry, but are maybe taking it for interest's sake, or maybe they're looking at getting into the industry. Would you have any advice for those students, or do you have any experiences around that?
Absolutely. I would say don't hesitate and just make the jump. There's really not a lot to lose. What you're going to lose a few hours out of your time. Trust me, there's a lot more you can learn. So I have had some of the wildest backgrounds. I've had lawyers attend. I've had criminology majors. I've had people that own farms really attend it. So because the built environment, we interact with it every day. It's a part of our lives. So no matter what industry you're in, you're doing something with a building at some point in time. And so that's why I've always found where people from backgrounds that I say really have attended and been absolutely fine, because I try my best to teach from the ground up, and I do not expect any prior knowledge at all. In fact, the blanker the slate, the better, to be honest, because I can kind of tell you the right way to approach certain things that are more complicated. But I would really just say don't hesitate. There's really not much to lose. And you never know what doors this could open for you that you maybe didn't even know a door was there.
For sure. Let's talk a little bit about the actual structure of the class. Is there a lot of interaction? Do you have like chat box? Do you do discussion forums in between lectures?
Absolutely. So most of my courses in the past have been kind of like boot camps, whereas our course here at Ashton is going to be a lot longer. So there's going to be a lot more time for a lot more interaction. Generally, in the past, I always have the chat box open on my second screen, and I just keep an eye on it for any question. When I have a moment to pause, I read out the question and I answer it, and I usually open up everybody's on mute normally, and then I open up the mic to just if there's more discussion. I'm really looking forward to the Ashton courses, because there's going to be more time. And one thing I love in my courses is everybody's from a different background and they know something that I don't. So if they're researching or they have experience in a part of an industry that I couldn't even know where to begin, a lot of the time they add to the class and they share it with their peers and me, which I really like. So for most of it is lecture based. At the end of every session, we'll do a few questions about what we talked about in the session. Now, in the course, I should mention that you're going to be getting my textbook as well as my practice exams. I forget exactly if that's included in the course or not, but you can inquire about that later on. And so my course is going to run similarly to the textbook, and it's my textbook that I wrote, which is really helpful because it goes with the course. And it's going to follow a very similar path to what we did today, kind of an intro to why green building exists, and then how do we answer the question of sustainability through the built environment, and just looking at one category at a time and what we need to do. And then the cumulative exam per se is the actual accreditation exam. If you want, as I said, I have a lot of students that just come out of interest. They don't really need to get the certification, and that's totally up to you. It's your decision if you want to get the LEED Green Associate or not. Since you're already going to be learning about it and studying for it, I say might as well. And everything's available online, and I try to distribute everything online, especially in these days.
Absolutely. Wonderful. How can students help themselves to succeed in this course? Are there certain qualities around patience or originality, or like what helps a student succeed in this subject area?
Good question. So nothing specific, and I mean that, in this for a reading, for a reason, in the sense that LEED looks at so many different elements of the building overall. So it's easy, and a lot of industries and work make you really try to hone in and perfect a certain skill, and then you forget about the big picture. So just thinking about how all these different designs and stakeholders constantly interact, and not getting too pigeonholed in one certain thing, is the right mentality and has really helped people in the past.
Wonderful. I love that answer. It's very, very open, right? I think it sort of goes back to what you're saying about how, any career path, any background is going to be more than welcome in this course, and we'll have a great chance of success. I always like asking our instructors this just for fun. Is there anything that you're reading right now for personal reading or for educational purposes in your spare time?
Yeah, so during the pandemic, I switched back between reading and TV. Right now, I'm in a deep TV mode, and I'm obsessed with a lot of Japanese live action shows, and French shows specifically is my cup of tea. I'm rereading. I actually have it out. I'm rereading Catch-22 because it's one of the only books that actually makes me laugh every time.
Nice.
So that's an easy one, but I'm a bit of a winter couch potato when I can during COVID, because there's not too much to do.
Super valid answer as well. So I would say it might be for educational purposes, it might just be for fun. It's always nice to hear. Well, I think just before we wrap up, I'll just give another little shout out for our attendees. We're really glad to have you all here today. You can always reach out via email at ceinfo@ashtoncollege.ca, or over the phone 604-891-1256, or toll free 1-866-759-6006. We could just put a comment in the chat box if anyone does have any further questions. We have a minute. You can jump in now, or you can contact us in the future. Lorne, I just want to say thank you so much for your time today and for that phenomenal presentation. Maggie as well, and Rika and Maria. Right before we wrap up, do you have any final words of advice or insight for prospective students?
Absolutely. If you're ever on the fence about something like this, whether it's a LEED certification or something else, take the plunge. There's really not much to lose. And if you're trying to retool and get more things on your resume to add, now's a great time to do it. I hope we never have as much downtime as we have right now. So might as well take advantage of it and really just take the leap.
Wonderful. It's a very positive note to end on. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And with that, I'll just wish you all a great rest of your week.